Hallelujah. Okay, so as you can see, today we're going to be talking about Antarctica. And depending on time, we may get into a little Noah, but we'll see. So we're going to talk about the hidden truth concerning Antarctica. So when we talk about Antarctica, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the South Pole. You know, this is what's known as the Antarctic Circle. And this is the area in which we're speaking to. Now, originally, a couple weeks ago, I gave a lesson and I was speaking about Antarctica, and I said that Antarctica was forbidden for civilians to explore. And by and large, that is true, but there are some exceptions. I got caught up in the message and neglected to mention that, you know, that some people can't go to Antarctica. So when I say that Antarctica is forbidden to humanity, I mean by and large. I was not trying to make things up, nor was I trying to avoid this fact. So I want, you know, to make everything explicitly clear, you know, that is not the case. You know, today you can fly over Antarctica from Australia. It'll cost you about $920 for economy class, or you can dish out about $60 or $150 for first class. This includes a full sleeper seat in the front ice class cabin. Now these flights are nonstop, and they fly a particular flight path, which they're not allowed to deviate from, at a minimum altitude of 6,000 feet. Now, that's important to remember, because all these flights have to follow the same flight path, you know, and they're not supposed to drop below 6,000 feet. Now, you can also land on Antarctica for a longer trip. Flights for these types of holidays depart from Australia, South Africa, Chile, or Argentina. The flights are not as frequent and a lot less predictable and cost around $75,500. A third option is a flight cruise option. The price ranges from $10,000 to $14,000 for a 2-week trip. And lastly, you can take just a cruise, which will run a minimum of $5,000, which will include the bare necessities and probably not the best seating options. The ships are allowed to dock in certain areas, but no more than 100 tourists are allowed upon shore at any one time. So if there's any more than that on the ship, then they will have to take turns, you know, going on there. Now, it is also a fact that there is no independent travel allowed below the 60th south parallel. And this is primarily what I was talking about. Even those places that you are allowed to go, you know, they're just small areas. It's just along the coast, and even those spots inland is certain spots. And when you get there, it's not like you can say, okay, well, come on, let's go and we're gonna go explore, and then we'll meet up back with you guys before it's time to take off. No, you have to stay within a very restricted perimeter, you know. And like I say, when the flights go there, they go over a certain flight path. They are not allowed to deviate from that flight path. Now, again, it is also a fact that there is no independent travel allowed below the 60th south parallel. The 60th parallel is a circle of latitude that is 60 degrees south of the Earth's equilateral plane. No land lies directly on the parallel. It crosses nothing but ocean, but that isn't to say that there's no land beyond that point. That you can get a perspective of just how much area we're talking about, let us consider the 60th north parallel, which is the direct opposite, you know, on the other side of the globe. It includes northern Canada, Alaska, much of Russia, Finland, Sweden, Iceland, and Greenland. You know, so this is the type of vastness of space that we're talking about, okay? Now, this restriction is due to the Antarctica Treaty. Some of you may remember me talking about the Antarctica Treaty, which was enacted on December 1st, 1959. Today, there are approximately 54 countries committed to it. Now, travel south of the 60th parallel of Antarctica is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for civilians. Yes, you can travel to some of the coastal lines. Yes, you can take flights inland to some of the ceremonial poles and back. Even then, as I said before, the plane must fly a certain altitude and pathway, and it's not allowed to deviate from it. So it's not like even they have liberty even in the air that they can just go flying around and seeing what they can see. They can't. It's important to note that all these tours are going to the very same places. They're not allowed to breach certain parameters. You can't just do what you want. It's very restricted. By the way, there was one flight, in all fairness, that broke the rules. So I don't want to leave them out. Until 1966, virtually all expeditions to the Antarctic had been organized by governments or had some measure of governmental backing. In that year, there appeared in Antarctica for the first time a commercially organized shipborne tourist expedition. In subsequent years, commercial tourism increased using ships and aircraft. The area most frequently visited by sea was the Antarctic Peninsula, which is still the most frequent. Regular inboard tourism began in 1977 and developed. Almost all of these flights overflew parts of Antarctica and returned home without landing. Airborne tourism diminished considerably following the tragic crash of Flight 901 of Air New Zealand on Mount Erebus in 1979 with the loss of 257 lives. Some of you folks may remember that. Now, Flight 901, the official report says, had mistakenly went off the allowed flight path by 26 miles and descended down to 1,500 feet. Now remember, regulations stated that they weren't to drop beneath 6,000 feet. That's not just arbitrary. That's not just, you hit an air pocket. That is pretty significant. Now there was no polar storm that day and no mechanical failure. The plane just flew into the mountain at 1,500 feet. At least so they say. When investigators listened to the cockpit voice recorder, that is the little black box that we always hear about, they were stunned to hear that in the final seconds before impact, none of the flight crew saw Mount Erebus in front of them. Now here it is, they done dropped down a few thousand feet, and they're heading straight for this huge mountain, but nobody sees it. Yeah. After his investigation concerning the event, Justice Peter Mahan will coin the phrase, an orchestrated litany of lies, in relation to the official report he was given. And this became a very famous saying, an orchestrated litany of lies, concerning this incident. One thing's for certain, they deviated from the path. They deviated from the allowed flight path. And another thing is certain, none of them came back alive. Now that's certain. All that other stuff is uncertain. But it's clear to see, when they was listening to the black box, no one saw, and they're listening like seconds before the impact. No one saw this huge mountain. No one saying anything. Selah. Kind of make you wonder, where were they trying to see to drop down so low? Why would they drop down several thousand feet? That they knew they weren't supposed to do. Thousands of feet beneath the regulated altitude. Yeah, it's one of them things that make you go, right? So all we know is that they did do so, and we know no one's talking about it because none of them lived to talk about it. So all we can do is take what they gave us and try to make heads or tails of it. Now, like I said, no one is allowed, no civilian is allowed beyond the 60th, south of the 60th parallel. Now, the amount of landmass beyond the 60th parallel is not something that's minuscule. It's about the size of the U.S. The whole United States. Actually, it's a little larger than the United States. You know, so if we were to take the United States and put it over Antarctica, this is what it would look like. You know, so you see it's well over 2/3 of the continent that, you know, you need a special permit to go see. You know, and don't misconstrue me in saying that, because even the parts that you are allowed to see over here by the peninsula and these other parts that you are allowed to see, it's only mostly on the coast and a couple spots inland, just a couple. I could not find more than 5 different spots that cruise lines and flights and all these folks that's visiting, you know, are actually stopping at. I couldn't even get to 5. It was something like 3, 4, something like that, you know. So, you know, yes, they're going to visit, you know, but it's really just a namesake only. You know, they're being shown exactly what they want them to see, so to speak. You know, nothing more, nothing less. The aforementioned Antarctica Treaty applied to the area 60 degrees south latitude, including all ice shelves. That means that you are generally not allowed within hundreds of miles, approximately 400 to 800 miles of it, without obtaining a permit to do so. So you can't even get close to the 60-degree mark. You know, you still going to be 400 to 800 miles, you know, away from it without a permit. If you insist on traveling south of the 60-degree mark, you must fill out Form DS 4131. So you can't say that they don't make allowance. They do have a form, you know, if you absolutely insist that you want to go and that you want to, you know, explore, you know, the South Pole. Okay, well, we have some regulations. We got some things that you need to go through in order to get that permission. Okay, you have to fill out Form DS 4131. On this form, on Section 39, you must disclose activities and purpose for going. Section 40 asks for a proposed itinerary with dates and places to be visited. You must include a proposed itinerary for all expeditions that will proceed south of 60 degrees south latitude, even if there's no intention for individuals to disembark onto land. So it doesn't matter if you're going to go on the land or not. Just to get past that 60-degree mark, you know, you have to have special permission, you know, even if you're not planning on going on land. If you get a visa to go to any other country, generally speaking, you are not limited to a certain neighborhood or certain pathways. You don't have to submit an itinerary concerning all your activities. Well, I plan on going to Cedar Point in Ohio, and then I'm going to go from there to Disney World in California, or Disneyland in California, and then Disney World in Florida. You know, you do not have to give an itinerary concerning all your activities, including their times and dates for approval. Even if you do get approved, which you probably won't, there are certain specially protected areas that you still won't be able to visit, no matter if you did get a permit by some miraculous chance. These specially protected areas aren't just a spot here and there either. They constitute 1,300 plus miles of land. That's a whole lot of land. You know, but that still leaves a vast area to explore. So even without that 1,300 miles, you know, because it's about 3,400 miles across. So even without that 1,300 miles, you know, and it's really closer to 1,400 miles, you still have approximately 2,000 miles that you can explore, technically speaking. You know, so, but that is as long as you don't have to go across one of those 1,300 miles in order to get there. Because if you have to cross over one of these 1,300, one of these specially protected areas, and there's no way across that area, you know, then you still can't go. You can't go no further. No one knows, we don't know where these areas are placed. but, well, I don't anyway, but suffice it to say it's 1,300 miles of land, no matter permit or no, you still won't be able to see. So that still leaves 2,000. That's quite a bit, Now, but let's say that you manage to secure a route that navigates around these specially protected areas. So you figured out a route around these 1,300 plus miles, right? You still have a couple thousand miles you could explore, right? Only thing is you won't be allowed to use aircraft, vessels, small boats, or other means of transport in ways that disturb wildlife, either at sea or at land. Now keep in mind that it gets upward to 70 degrees below zero. This is the coldest spot on the planet, some of the roughest terrain on the planet, some of the highest altitudes on the planet. You climbing uphill. Now you can't use any transport. Okay? No aircraft, no vessels, no small boats, none of that. Nothing that'll disturb the wildlife. Now, not to mention that it's nothing out there but some penguins, so they say, and some birds. Okay? Now ask yourselves, how can you take a 6,800-mile trip across Antarctica and back without disturbing any wildlife? And with no motor vehicles of any sort. Okay, but suffice it to say, nevertheless, you're still determined to do this. So you say, you'll just bring some sled dogs to navigate through the terrain like they do at the North Pole, right? No, okay, we got this. Only thing is, at the South Pole, you're not allowed to bring any non-native animals into the Antarctic either. So, the sleds with the dog sleds are out, in other words. No, that's not an option. So now you reduce the walking. Okay, so now you reduce the walking 6,800 miles across and back in some of the harshest weather on the planet. Much of it's uphill. But you're still determined to go, thinking that, the only one that could possibly enable you to survive this trip will help you, right? Then they hit you with another restriction. One that says, do not damage plants, for example, by walking, driving, or landing on extensive moss beds or lichen-covered scree slopes. So now you have to alter your route again, right? So let's take a review of the things that prohibitions here. One, taking or harmful interference with Antarctic wildlife is prohibited except in accordance with a permit issued by a national authority, which you won't be getting. 2, do not use aircraft, vessels, small boats, or their means of transport in ways to disturb wildlife, whether at sea or at land. So in other words, don't have nothing with a motor. 3, do not feed, touch, or handle birds or seals, or approach or photograph them in ways that cause them to alter their behavior. Special care is needed when animals are breeding or molting. Really? Okay. 4, do not damage plants, for example, by walking, driving, or landing on extensive moss beds or lichen-covered scree slopes. 5, do not use guns or explosives. So if Sasquatch is out there, you're just up the creek. All right? Keep noise to the minimum. Do not yell when he comes chasing you to avoid frightening the wildlife. 6, do not bring non-native plants or animals into the Antarctic. For example, live poultry, pet dogs, cats, houseplants. Yes, you will not be planting a tree out there. Any of the above prohibitions can and likely will be used to deny your application. But say, just for the sake of argument, that you do find a way around all the above. Imagine the difficulty of hauling food. First of all, you have to have enough food to get you 6,800 miles on foot up to unknown elevations. But that's not all. Generally speaking, you'll also have to carry your poop with you. Yes, you are not allowed to leave your poop on the South Pole. Now, you can get a permit for your poop from the National Science Foundation, which is a whole separate entity. So, you have to go through them in order to try to get, a permit, to leave your poop, which, is likely not to happen. Now, in addition to all this, you'll also have to get an environmental impact assessment. which means the environmental review process required by the provisions of this part in Annex 1 of the protocol, and includes preparation by the operator and U.S. government review of an environmental document and public access and the circulation of environmental documents to other parties and the Committee on Environmental Protection as required by Annex 1 of the protocol. Now, Article 8 of the protocol requires that the parties have to conduct environmental impact assessments for their Antarctic activities, and provides for 3 levels of assessment. According to the potential impacts of each activity, the procedures for environmental impact assessment are detailed in Annex 1 to the protocol. If a proposed activity is determined in a preliminary stage of assessment to have less than a minor or transitory impact, it may proceed. Now, if an activity is determined as likely to have a minor or transitory impact, then an initial environmental evaluation, an IEE, must be prepared. If an IEE indicates the potential for more than a minor or transitory impact, or if such an impact is otherwise determined to be likely, a comprehensive environmental evaluation, a CEE, must be prepared. Now, draft CEEs are made publicly available and considered by the CEP, which then advises ATCM. Comments provided by other parties and the ATCM must be addressed in the final CEE, which is used as the basis for making a decision about whether and how the activity is conducted. Now, what all this means is that your CEE must pass an initial review. If it does, it will be sent to all parties, and you gotta wait till all parties to get back with you, and that is 54 countries involved with the treaty. Now, a CEE, just in case you're wondering, you know, the one I looked up was 185 pages long. So you gotta put that together too. Now, but before you can even get to this point, you would need an environmental impact statement so that you can get the initial environmental impact assessment, which, by the way, can run anywhere from $250,000 to $2 million. Still want to go, huh? And this must be paid before they deny you. Oh, I meant deny or approve you. You know, so you see, for all practical purposes, Antarctica is, in fact, off limits to humanity. You know, yes, you can go and see the coastline. You can go to a couple spots inland, you know, but you got to go a specific route, specific path, fly a specific height, you know. Now, I don't know how, you know, I know some of you got eagle eyes, but 6,000 feet is pretty high up. You know, don't you dare go down to 1,500 feet where you can see something. You know, we saw what happened to Flight 901, right? You know, so for all practical purposes, Antarctica is off limit to humanity. You know, it's just a fake out. You know, the little trips that you get to go there, it's just a fake out, you know, in our essence. You know, you can't really go and explore, you know, if that's your heart's desire. All right, so now that I got that out the way, you know, we'll take a look at it. The Patriarchs study, where we left off with Noah, and see if we can't get a little in there. So the book of Noah, and this is coming from the Dead Sea Scrolls, from out of 1Q20, which is one of the caves that the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and this is columns 6 through 18, and we left off, I believe, at column 10. And, you know, this is an important story because the Messiah tells us, as it was, so it will be. As it was in the days of Noah, that's how it's going to be in the end times. And we want to make certain we're not like these folks, knocking on the door, trying to get in, you know, when the flood comes, right? You know, and right now the flood is already here. It's a flood of lies, but the door is not sealed. You can still get in. So we left off with column 10. We're going to finish up column 10. You know, so can I have my first reader read column 10, the first couple stanzas, please.
Okay. Then I blessed the Adonai of all, who kept me safe. I, Noah, spoke of these words to them. Now go, give praise and glory to the Creator. Remember the instructions of our Adonai. who is the King of all ages forever and ever. The ark rested on one of the mountains of Ararat, and the eternal fire. I atoned for the whole earth. Genesis 8:4. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat. First I offered a male goat. Afterward I burned the fat upon the fire. Second I offered a thank offering, consisting of ox, ram, and sheep. Then I poured out all of their blood on the base of the altar, and burned all of their flesh on the altar. Third, I offered the young turtle doves, flesh and blood, with them upon the altar.
Hallelujah. Thank you. Okay, so here it is in column 10. We have Noah speaking. He said, "Then I blessed the Adonai of all who kept me safe." I, Noah, spoke these words to them, and it tells us that the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. And, and so when we look at our measuring stick, when we compare that to what our standard or measuring stick is, our canonized scriptures, we see that it does in fact back up the book of Noah. Genesis 8:4 says, "And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, upon the mountains of Ararat." So it definitely bears witness. And then it speaks about Noah making some offerings there. And if we continue on with column 10, it says, "Then I offered fine wheat flour mixed together with oil containing incense for the meal offerings. I said a blessing and was putting salt on all of them, and the scent of my offering rose up to the heavens." And it says, "Then the Most High blessed." So when we look at our measuring stick again, in Genesis 8:20 through 22, we see that Noah truly did build an altar and offer some sacrifices. Genesis 8:20 through 22. My next reader, please.
"And Noah builded an altar unto Yahuwah, and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And Yahuwah smelled a sweet savor, and Yahuwah said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. And Elohim blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth."
Thank you. Okay, so we see in Genesis 8, it does in fact tell us Noah building an altar and took of every clean beast and of every clean fowl and offered burnt offerings, even as being as explained or depicted in the book of Noah. And it says, "And Yahuwah smelled a sweet savor." Now the book of Noah says, afterwards the Most High blessed, and our account in our measuring stick, our standard, our canonized scriptures does bear witness to that as well. Genesis 9:1, Elohim blessed Noah and his sons. So we see there's no contradiction here. It is aligning. Column 11 says, "I, Noah, was at the door of the ark when the waters receded." It cuts off and picks back up, "My sons and their sons," and then picks back up the mountains, valleys, wilderness, and coastlands, all. Then cuts off, pick back up. "Then I, Noah, went out and walked through the breadth and the depth of the land." Cuts off, pick back up. "It had been reborn with grass, herbs, grain, and fruit trees with leaves. Then I blessed Yahuwah of heaven. Glory to him. He showed his love for his creation by removing and obliterating all those who practice violence, wickedness, and deceit, but rescued the righteous man." Yeah. Hallelujah. Now this aligns with our measuring stick, canonized scriptures as well. Genesis 6:9 says, "These are the generations of Noah, who was a just and perfect man, just and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with Elohim." So we see he truly was righteous. Yah truly did rescue the righteous man. Amen. It continues on to say, "A heavenly one appeared to me and said, 'Do not fear, Noah. I will be with you and all your sons who will be like you forever. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Rule over all of them, and over the seas, and over its wildernesses, over its mountains, and over everything that is in them. I will now give everything to you and your sons for food, that of the vegetation and the herbs of the land. Interesting, because our account does not add that of the vegetation and herbs of the land. You know, it just says give everything to you and for your sons for food. You know, Genesis 9:2 does bear witness, you know, that he did have rule over them. It says, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that move upon the earth, and all of the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. You know, so you see, Noah was one of the first world rulers. Amen. King of the world. See, now that, just before we move on, that should sound kind of familiar to you as well, because it's very similar to what was told Adam, is it not? Yeah. See, Adam was the first ruler of the world. Noah is the second. You know, and what I want you to see is that this was the will of Elohim, and is the will of Elohim, that the righteous rule over the world. You know, and see, it's a big part of the picture that we miss in Scripture concerning like New Jerusalem. Because New Jerusalem is like the capital city for the King of Righteousness who rules over the world. You know, and so, you know, when you just read the Canaanite scriptures as a whole, you know, you don't really get that. You just kind of get like this is going to be a new advent. But it isn't. It's actually something that has been, you know, perpetrated throughout the generations. Yah has always been trying to establish a righteous kingdom upon the earth to rule over the world. You know, and this is even when our Messiah came preaching. Repent, for the kingdom of Elohim is at hand. You know, they all understood that kingdom would rule over the world. You know, but it doesn't translate very well in Scripture when you don't have some of these missing pieces. You know, so, you know, I just wanted to point that out. Now, column 11, the end of column 11 says, but blood you will not eat. And our canon, our measuring stick, it bears witness to that too. Now, Genesis 9:3-4. Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. All right? Moving on to column 12. It says, I have now placed my bow in the clouds, and it is a sign for me in order to be. It picked back up on the mountains of Ararat. After this, I left the mountain. My sons and I had to rebuild the cities because the devastation was great. Then my sons and had many sons and daughters after the flood. And again, our measuring stick, our Canaanite scriptures do bear witness to this. Genesis 9:12-13. And Elohim said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token, a covenant between me and the earth. You know, so, in case you're wondering, this word token is the same word as this word for sign, which is oath in the Hebrew. All right? Now, column 12 continues on. Let me have my next reader read the next part of column 12, please.
My oldest son, Shem, had a son, Patriarchs, 2 years after the flood. And the sons of Shem were Elam, Ashur, Patriarchs, Lud, and Aram, with 5 daughters. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan, with 7 daughters. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras, with 4 daughters. My sons and I began to plant crops.
Hallelujah. Okay, so we see Shem, he had 10 kids. Ham, let me see, he had 11. Japheth also had 11. So we see the average family size was about 10 back then. You know, it says my sons and I began to plant crops. You know, so now our measuring stick also bears witness that this account is correct. When we look at Genesis 10, 21 and 22, it says, unto Shem also the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born, the children of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, and Lud, and Amram. You know, so we see that the sons match the sons with the names that the book of Noah depicts. Now, the book of Noah gives us some additional information, tells us they also had 7 daughters, you know, which we're not told in our measuring stick. Also, in Genesis 10:6, it bears witness to the sons of Ham, being Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. You know, and we see the same thing in the book of Noah, and likewise with the sons of Japheth. In Genesis 10:2 says the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, and Yavan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tiras. You know, and we see the same thing in the book of Noah. You know, so we see there is no discrepancy here. It is actually aligning with our canon, you know, with our measuring stick. Now, column 12 goes on to say, I planted a great vineyard in Mount Lubar. In 4 years, it produced great amounts of wine for me. You know, and we also have a second witness to that in our canon, Genesis 9:20. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. You know, so everything's lining right up. Let me have my next reader read the next part of column 12.
I brought out all the wine when the first feast came, on the first day of the first feast, in the first month. In the midst of my vineyard I opened this vessel and began to drink from it on the first day of the 5th year of the vineyard. On that day I, my sons and grandsons, with all our wives and daughters, gathered together at the altar. I blessed Yahuwah of heaven, the Most High El, the great Holy One, who saved us from the destruction which my fathers hid, and I lay down upon my bed, and my mind stirred.
Hallelujah. Okay, so here it is. He had a bit of wine. Been a long time since he had some wine. And he lay down in his bed and his mind stirred. Column 13 is concerning the dream that he had while his mind was stirring. Now it says, to you, Noah the king. See, he knows the king of the world. And it breaks off, it picks back up, and the decree breaks off, picks back up. To all the forest with all the birds of heaven, the beasts of the field, the cattle of the land, and the creeping things of the dry ground. Breaks off, picks back up. The stones and the clay were cutting down the forest to make it a place for themselves. Then also the gold, silver, brass, and iron were cutting down the forest to make it a place for themselves. Then I watched as the sun, moon, and stars cut down part of the forest to make theirs. Finally, the swarming things of the earth and the water consumed it. And the water ceased, it ended. Cuts off, picks back up. Then I saw that the olive tree had grown tall. It continued to grow many hours with beautiful fruit, a great amount of foliage. I wondered about this olive tree with its abundance of leaves. Cuts off, pick back up. Everything tying ropes unto it. Then the winds of heaven blew violently against this olive tree, ripping off its branches and breaking it to pieces. First the wind blew in from, cuts off, pick up, west. It struck it, causing its leaves and fruit to fall from it and scattered it to the winds. After this, breaks off, pick back up, and another wind from, and it breaks off again. You know, and then it picks up with column 14, picks up with, you were thinking about the tree with its upper branch separating the budding with much fruit and foliage. Understand that you are the great cedar tree that was standing before you on a mountaintop in your dream. The shoots which emerged from it and grew equal to its height are your 3 sons. It breaks off, pick back up. The first shoot that you saw adhering to the cedar trunk with one branch separating from it and becoming an olive tree means the first son will not separate from you for all his days, and among his seed your name will be called. Now just thinking about that for a minute, what was his first son? Who was his first son, rather? Shem. Absolutely. From his division, all your sons will be blessed. It really just says all your sons, and the translator actually put that in there. And from him, the first son will come forth as a righteous planting for all. And then it cuts off, pick back up, standing fast forever. Now this is interesting because it makes me think of the olive tree that we have in our canon. You know, and it just so happens that in that olive tree, branches were broken off as well. You know, think that's just a coincidence? Or maybe could Apostle Paul have been borrowing, you know, from this passage? Totally possible, seeing that it would have been available to him, even though it was hidden from us for over 2,000 years. Romans 11:17-21, it says, and if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches. But if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if Elohim spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. You know, so, you know, it makes you think, where did Paul get this analogy from? Could this be the source of it? You know, column 14, you know, continues on. It says, the second shoot adhering to the trunk of the cedar tree, and cuts off, picks back up. The branch of the third shoot brings the darkness, and a few of the boughs that enter into the midst of the boughs of the first one represents 2 sons. You know, and the translators seem to think that they were Canaan and Nimrod. You know, one south and one north of the land. As for their few boughs that enter into the midst of the boughs of the first one, the descendants of this shoot will invade his land by the coastlands of the great sea, and not, it cuts off, pick back up, to understand the mystery after your death, cuts off, you will search, cuts off, the mystery of, cuts off, entering into it. And the first one cuts off for himself above all their gods, which cuts off for himself, cuts off in an allotment in Amania next to Elam, cuts off. The translator seems to think that Elam speaks to Iran. The Great Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea, and the translator seems to think it's talking about the Mediterranean Sea. Serve first, exchanging his allotment for an allotment. You know, so that's the other part of column 14, and that's where we're going to end it. So I'll say to be continued. Pray it was a blessing. And we'll pick it up next week.